In August of 2017 on Thursday, a horrendous smell spread throughout Richard's house at Gwendoline Street in Toxteth. The smell wasn't unusual for Richard, so he just opened his windows, sprayed some air freshener, and reached downstairs to see his disabled wife, VALERIE WALLACH. Richard didn't expect to see VALERIE babbling in her armchair near the bay window, which made him reach the medical center to seek medical help. He claimed that his wife was dying in a chair at his home. Firefighters and paramedics rushed to his house to help Richard and his wife immediately. But when they reached his home, they found a sea of trash bags full of rotting food, human urine, and feces. They waded through the mountains of nasty maggots to get to VALERIE Wallach, who was found barely alive, seated in an armchair. The fire officers then moved her to the Royal Liverpool Hospital, where Richard was told that his wife would almost certainly die. When everyone expected a loud scream or some sort of moaning from Richard, his strange reply shocked everyone. "Thanks for letting me know, but who will sort out my issue? I have been constipated for weeks." Why would Richard give such a reply? And what happened to VALERIE Wallach at Gwendoline Street in Toxteth? And who had left VALERIE to die? Is the inhuman story of VALERIE Wallach. So find yourself a safe place before we look into an absolutely horrible case. Without any further ado, let's dive right in. Toxteth. Toxteth is a Liverpool inner-city neighborhood in the historical counties of Lancashire and Merseyside. It is a pleasant area to live in with lush green parks, various shops and restaurants, and a vibrantly varied community. Toxteth has come a long way since the infamous riots in the 1980s. Over the last few years, the neighborhood has undergone extensive renovation, including removing many of the area's Victorian terraces. It has resulted in many new buildings, but it has also left some room with a lot of cleared land and abandoned streets. Gwendoline Street in Toxteth. On one such street named Gwendoline Street in Toxteth is where our victim, VALERIE Wallach, and her husband, Richard Wallach, lived. VALERIE Wallach was a 61-year-old disabled mother of 2 children, and Richard Wallach was 66 years old then. The Wallachs had been married for 25 years and had relocated to Liverpool a few years before the incident. They both seemed to live a life disconnected from the real world with no telephone or people. They didn't have any guests, and their only relatives were their 2 children. Even the outsiders or residents of nearby homes never noticed anybody visiting Richard or VALERIE. And it was on August 24th, 2017, when a horrendous smell started to spread throughout Richard's house at Gwendoline Street. Richard thought the scent was nothing uncommon, so he opened the windows and used some air fresheners. He went downstairs to look at his disabled wife, where Richard found her babbling. Richard thought that his wife was dying in her armchair near the bay window in their living room. Unfortunately, Richard couldn't call emergency service since he didn't have a phone to seek help. So Richard went to a nearby medical center to ask for help while leaving VALERIE alone at the house. And this is what brought the emergency services and firefighters. When the firefighters and paramedics reached Gwendoline Street, they had no idea that they would find a living, breathing human being in the worst condition they had ever seen. Because of the unpleasant odor in and out of the house, paramedics chose to wear protective clothing. When they broke into the house, all they saw at first was a few framed portraits on the shelves, but the images were scarcely visible due to the filth in the gloomy room. They never believed that someone would live there. Then they found VALERIE Wallach. She was confined to an armchair near a bay window in the living room, cluttered with trash and unopened mail. Every surface encircling the brown leather of the armchair contaminated with VALERIE's feces and was covered in piles of paper, instant noodle packaging, and garbage bags. In addition, the couple's kitchen was littered with open food containers and garbage piles. The situation was horrible, with many trash bags including rotten and moldy food. VALERIE was out of breath, drained of energy, and her skin was irritated and infested with flies, maggots, and ulcers. To get to her, rescue workers had to sift through the bags. She had feces on her skin and maggots in the folds of her flesh. A pot noodle sachet was attached to her leg, and newsprint was sticking to her clothes. She was covered with flies, her teeth were stained, and she appeared overweight. Valerie's legs were swollen and covered in a thick brown sludge as the team cleared trash bags away from her feet. They applied an oxygen mask to her face, but they requested assistance when they realized that they couldn't move her independently. They continued to clear some of the garbage bags containing pee and feces, and due to the foul-smelling pus oozing from the ulcers, Valerie must have been in extreme pain. As firefighters attempted to take her from her chair, she became angry and began yelling. She could not speak due to tooth decay and only responded when removed from the chair, confirming that she wasn't dead. As Valerie was being relocated, one officer saw that blood, body fluids, and skin had been left behind. Valerie was moved to the Royal Liverpool Hospital in a terrible state, with her clothing covered in feces, visibly showing that she hadn't been cleaned in a very long time. According to Kate Johnston, a tissue viability support nurse, it took doctors and nurses at the Royal Liverpool Hospital 90 minutes to clean Valerie. In addition, her blackened teeth were so decayed that she could not talk and screamed in pain when staff tried to clean her mouth. Richard reported to the doctor that Valerie had been in these unsettling circumstances for several days, but the doctor believed she had been in this terrible state for weeks, if not months. She was in critical condition, and the doctors were taken aback by her bad health. Valerie's pressure sores were classified as grade 4, the most dangerous, and had caused her skin to shed down to the bone. Her heels, the backs of her legs, and the area behind her buttocks were all covered by these sores. It revealed severe tissue damage extending down to the bone. Valerie's health had deteriorated to the point where doctors decided that her care should be palliative or designed to make her as comfortable as possible before she died. The doctor tries to ease off the old lady's pain, but she was literally left to die in the most terrible manner, where her body had begun to rot while she was still alive. The doctors felt helpless and went to inform Richard about her condition. When Richard was told that his wife was almost certainly going to die, neither doctors nor the nurses expected his strange reply that shocked everyone. Richard said, "Thanks for letting me know, but who will sort out my issue? I have been constipated for weeks." According to a nurse, Richard's behavior after knowing his wife's condition was strange, because he did not appear to be concerned or grieving for his wife. Unfortunately, she lived for only 19 days after being admitted, dying at the Royal Liverpool Hospital on September 12, 2017. Rather than suffering in pain and sacrificing herself to the maggots and flies, she deserved a better place than her filthy world. According to an autopsy, multi-organ failure, breast cancer, and infected pressure ulcers were the causes of death. According to the paramedic, Valerie had been eating, urinating, and defecating in the same chair for quite some time. She was only diagnosed with cancer after being admitted to the hospital, so who knows how long she had had it for? Who knows anything about the terrible life she had lived for months? Honestly, we can only speculate. When the bereavement officer at Royal Liverpool Hospital offered to cover the cost of a basic funeral package for his wife, Richard was irritated that it did not include the supply of a car for him. Considering that he didn't take proper care of his wife, Richard Wallach was charged with manslaughter through gross negligence. Richard's tale. Richard was taken to interrogation, where he told the investigators that they had been together for 25 years and that he loved her. Richard initially said that he was not responsible for his wife's death when questioned if he was guilty of his wife's death in court. "I looked after her to the best of my ability. I took it for granted that she was okay. If she had been in pain, she would have told me, and I would have taken action," Richard said. Richard claimed he had not noticed the heavy odor of dirt and decay in the house when asked about it. However, he did admit to opening windows and spraying air fresheners. According to Richard's tale, Valerie had chosen to spend her time in an armchair. He stated that he initially assisted Valerie using the restroom upstairs, but she soon became immobilized. He claimed she dozed off on the chair, and he would check on her several times a day, giving her sandwiches and takeaway dinners like fish and chips to eat herself and Coca-Cola to drink. However, Richard acknowledged that he hadn't bathed her in a while, since she didn't like anybody touching her. Because of what was wrong with her, he was afraid to touch her. The investigators gave Richard the images of his wife and her injuries. Seeing the photos, Richard answered that Valerie looked very terrible. He also added that he had a hoarding problem, so that he couldn't recollect those injuries. He was evaluated by a psychologist, and it was confirmed that he had a hoarding problem, but no other disorder. Richard said he couldn't recall when asked why he was so unconcerned with his wife's critical state in the hospital. Richard said he couldn't remember. He stated that he expected her to get better in the hospital and did not believe that she would die. He also said that he did everything he could to look after Valerie. According to his defense attorney, Richard is a senior man who has led a quiet, unassuming, unremarkable, and innocent life. Richard may have been a senior citizen, but he did nothing to assist her, or more crucially, to arrange assistance for her until it was far too late. Even though he was the only one living with her and caring for her, Richard was oblivious of Valerie's deteriorating health. When things became worse, he opted to stay in a room upstairs, which seemed to be the cleanest room. Cigarette packets and filled ashtrays were on an ironing board that Richard used as a table in the house's most spotless room. According to medical studies, Valerie died early due to pressure sores and infection. However, the jury disproved his arguments and Richard was found guilty of gross negligent manslaughter. Richard was sentenced to 8 years in prison in 2019. Richard is self-obsessed, according to the judge, which means he is unduly consumed with his life and surroundings and only thinks about himself. In other words, he is a complete egotist, and his egotism was directly responsible for his wife's death. Richard has no other mental issues other than a hoarding habit, and he maintained the rooms he used pretty clean. A representative for Liverpool City Council stated that it was a terrible case of neglect, and that adult services had no engagement with Mr. and Mrs. Wallach prior to this awful tragedy. Due to Richard's negligence, Valerie's final months on this planet were spent in excruciating pain, filth, and misery. After hearing such horrific tales of neglect, I'm left wondering how a couple that lasted 25 years can leave their spouse to rot and die in the most heinous of ways. Why do such horrific acts of incompetence go unnoticed by those around? It is time for justice to be served. People with disabilities must be enabled to report such negligence and be empowered to seek justice. At the very least, our video might help another Valerie change her fate. How did you feel after hearing about this case? Let us talk about it in the comments section, but before you leave, offer us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Then hit the bell button to get notified about our new exciting cases. We will see you all again.